Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Parallax Abstraction, and welcome to another episode of Retro Flashback, showcasing gaming's roots for a new generation. Today we're going to be taking a look at the second game in the Capcom Arcade Cabinet collection for the Xbox 360 and the PlayStation 3. If you're just tuning in now, if you're interested in the Capcom Arcade Cabinet collection kind of as a whole and want an overview on all the unique features it brings, along with it, then you can check out the first video in this series I did 2 videos ago, I guess it would be. And that has a very detailed breakdown of all the features and customization options and whatnot that Capcom Arcade Cabinet has. It's pretty cool. It's a long video, but it's worth checking out. So, one other little programming note just before we get started here. I apologize for the audio glitches and sync problems that both that video and my last video for Vulgus had. You can blame Elgato Systems for that. I most certainly do. I use an Elgato Game Capture HD to do these videos when I record off consoles, and well, their software for anything that isn't a Mac is not very good. The old version had a bunch of problems, and they pushed out a new version that didn't fix any of those problems and added a bunch more. So I have played around and tweaked my setup and done a few test videos, and I think the problem has been resolved, so hopefully we won't see any more of that this time. I apologize for that. I almost lost that footage entirely, but I managed to get it back. But it was either publish it with those glitches in it or re-record all that content, and I just didn't have the time to do that. So sorry about that, but hopefully that will be the last time we run into that. Anywho, so off we go. So we are taking a look at SonSon, or could be SonSon. I call it SonSon because, you know, that's how it's spelled, right? So this is a pretty neat game. This is, well, last episode we looked at Vulgus, which was actually Capcom's first ever game. I'm not sure if this was their second game, but it was released in the same year, so it is still very, very early in Capcom history. And it's a pretty unique title. It's an auto-scrolling platformer, as you're seeing here in the attract mode. But the neat thing about it is that while it does have a few platforming elements, most of its mechanics are derived from horizontal shmups. And it's pretty neat the way this works. There aren't a lot of games that play the way this one does. I had actually not only never played SonSon, but never even heard of it before Capcom Arcade Cabinet. And as you can see from the high score table there, I put some time into this, and I'm actually really, really enjoying this game. It's a lot of fun. It's very, very difficult, as most arcade games were, but it is a lot of fun and very mechanically unique. So I'm looking forward to showing this off. This does have 2-player co-op, and through Capcom Arcade Cabinet you can play it over Xbox Live. I'm just playing by myself, but it still plays very well by yourself, though I would imagine it's decidedly harder. So, you see the basic idea here. You've got waves of enemies coming at you, of course, and your goal is to not die, among other things. But so this game does have a story. It's pretty basic. Basically, a bunch of your friends are got kidnapped, and your goal is to get to the statue of Buddha, which is at the end of this area. So you see here, this is the interesting part about this game, is that it basically plays as one huge level, but the level environments change. So you see we've got those little stones up top. I don't know what those bubble guys are. I never figured it out. Well, I kind of bombed that, but we'll do better next time. So the levels change, and the enemies that come at you change as you progress forward, but there's no really solid level breaks. You're basically playing until you get all the way to the end of this area, which is pretty interesting. Most games of this era didn't run for a long continuous period. They usually had sort of set levels that you were working your way to the end of. But this sort of did it in a very long-form manner, which was pretty cool for the 80s. Vulgus was kind of like that. Vulgus was not continuous, but the levels were very, very long. That seemed to have been a core tenet of Capcom's early design. But it's neat. I like this idea because it gives it sort of a manic feel, right? And so you see your objective here is to take out enemies, of course, which gives you points. And like a lot of shmups, those enemies that come in sort of flying up and down in waves like that yield points for each one you kill, and if you can kill the whole wave, you get a special bonus. score attack game, of course. These are all arcade games, so they're pretty much all very heavily focused on score. And then you have these guys, which I imagine share a lot of the same AI routines as some of the enemies in Vulgus, because if you'll recall from that video, a lot of the enemies in Vulgus sort of came at you. Like, it was not a set pattern like a lot of shmup games are. They came into the screen, and if you didn't take them out within a certain amount of time, they would actually sort of follow you around. And that could make that game very, very challenging because, whoa, geez, because if you didn't get to them, yes, these things are rather challenging obstacles. Because if you didn't get to them in time, they would come after you and they would follow you around, which could get really, really hairy really, really quick if a lot of them came on the screen at the same time. And very similar mechanic here as well. Okay, so here we have, this is sort of a boss, I guess if you want to call it that. You have these little sort of devil doors, well, devil doors, skull doors, I guess they kind of are. And they have these enemies behind them. And your goal is to take those out as quickly as you can. If you don't take them out within a time limit, as you can see there, the game will just progress onward without you. But there's an incentive to do that. And you get these really friggin' annoying mosquito guys, which come in a big pile, just sort of hang on the screen, and then, like a lot of the other enemies, make a bead straight for you. And that is brutal. And now we have these sort of larger form enemies. Again, they kind of look like bosses, but they're not. They're just harder mob enemies, which is really cool. But you saw, by taking them out, I got some fat points for that. I got like 5 grand each for those guys. And there's all these various little sundry items, fruits, and I think I saw French fries at one point earlier on, and all sorts of things like that, all just in the interest of points. The mechanics of this game are really fairly simple. You've sort of got the one weapon, you're not powering up, you're not really leveling your character or improving his stats or anything like that. Wow, that was far and away the best run of this game I've ever had. You're basically just trying to get to the end of the level and rack up as much score as you can. So it's deceptively simple, but very compelling at the same time. Now, since I seem to be doing okay on this, what I'm going to do is I am going to switch back to the score attack mode so that, at least while I'm recording this video, I can also post to the leaderboards. So, like a lot of the other games in Capcom Arcade Cabinet, you get these little unlocks, usually gallery stuff in that, just for completing certain progress milestones. Usually it involves reaching a certain level or playing for a certain length of time, something like that. I have a couple of unlocks for SonSon already from just having played it previous to this. I'm going to play International. The last time I tried to play the Japanese version of this, it was rather interesting when I got to input my name on the leaderboard and all the characters were in Japanese, because of course they are. But yeah, I actually am having a lot of fun with this game. I'm kind of surprised I never heard of it before and that it isn't more fondly regarded among retro enthusiast circles. Like, I've never heard anybody talk about this game before, and it really surprises me because it's very well made. And I haven't seen a lot of other games that play this way, where it combines mechanics from two different genres that you generally don't see go together, and does it in a fairly manic fashion with tight controls, and really gives you a lot of good... It's a really good sort of scoring system, and really interesting that there is an incredible amount of depth to the scoring system. Like, there are a ton of these little power-up items, and very different score conditions for taking out the waves of enemies that come in, and like the scoring system is extremely varied. And obviously somebody put a lot of work into it, and you know, they designed all these item sprites and a score attack mode that I suck at apparently. But really all it is in the end is they're all just score items, but it's a very, very deep scoring system, and I really, really like that. I imagine this would actually be a lot of fun yeah, thanks for that game. I imagine this would actually be very good in a two-player context because it's kind of a, what I call competitive co-op, which is that you are working together to get to the end of the level, but at the same time, you each have your own score, so you're trying to help each other through the level while also trying to rob each other of all the various fruits and french fries and other such power-ups littered throughout the level so that you can get a higher score than your friends. So that's pretty neat. I really, really like that. Unfortunately, I don't have ready access to people who have... Jeez. This is embarrassing. Yeah, I unfortunately don't have ready access to anyone who has Capcom Arcade Cabinet, so it's not easy for me to do co-op stuff in this, but I'm sure this will be really fun. Now, there is one thing I do want to say about this. If you have access, if you don't own Capcom Arcade Cabinet yet and have the ability to purchase this on both of its available platforms, there is an argument to be made for considering the PS3 version, especially when it comes to this game and a couple of others in this collection, and I'll tell you what that is. As anyone who's used a 360 for more than 5 seconds will tell you, the D-pad on the 360 controller is bloody terrible. I don't know what the hell Microsoft was thinking when they designed it, but it is terrible to use. It's just not responsive, it's mushy, and it's just not very good. This is a game that was designed with a arcade joystick in mind for its control method, obviously. Joysticks being slotted meant that getting digital movement was very easy and very precise. That is not so when you are using the Xbox... Oh yeah, when you are using the Xbox D-pad. Now, this game, the Capcom Arcade Cabinet does have full support for both the D-pad and the 360 analog sticks, as you would expect. But it is much harder to play a game like this with the analog stick because the analog sticks are 8-way movement. Well, 8-way movement, they're 360 movement, really. And these games are not built for that. So, especially in the later levels when things get a little manic and crazy, you really require precise response out of your control input, and it's very hard to get that with the analog stick. And unfortunately, the 360 D-pad is so crappy. Like, that's what I'm trying to play with here, but I will say, you know, not trying to say that I don't suck at video games, because I do kind of suck at video games, but at the same time, the several times that I have died in this game, I can say without question, are due to the fact that the 360 D-pad prevented me from moving in the direction that I wanted. Sweet. Got some nice score there. Now, there is the updated 360 D-pad you can buy that comes with that little... or the 360 controller you can buy that comes with that little twisty D-pad that is supposedly much more responsive. I've never used one of those, and I'm not paying an obscene amount of money to get a D-pad that's designed the way it should have been in the bloody first place. Sweet. But that is where a compelling argument can be made for the PS3 version of this game, because say what you will about the DualShock 3, I actually like the DualShock, but most people I know don't. The D-pad on that controller is excellent. It is almost arcade quality. And I could see games like this being a lot easier to play and having far fewer deaths as a result of poor control response if you were using the PS3 controller. And there are other games in the Capcom Arcade Cabinet package, which I keep tempting fate with those guys. There are other games in the Capcom Arcade Cabinet package that could benefit from having access to a better D-pad as well. So that is something to consider if you do have a 360 and a PS3 and don't have a particular, you know, devotion to playing most of your downloadable titles on one or the other. Then the PS3 might be something to consider. If you have something like, you know, a third-party Xbox 360 controller with a better designed D-pad, or something like an arcade stick, which I actually do have a Street Fighter 4 arcade stick that always seems to live at Styles' place, that would also work very well in cases like this. So something to consider. But you can't get used to it. I mean, as you saw, I'm doing okay here, all things considered. I mean, if I were to go and look at the leaderboards and some of the replays, obviously I am probably in the very bottom rung of people when it comes to SonSon scoring, but I'm still doing okay with it, so you can adapt to it. But this is pretty fun. I have to say, this is a game I could see myself putting some real time into. I mean, I love score attack games, and I love games that have really well-designed scoring systems. And that is not as common as you may think. Scoring systems were often designed in a fairly exploitive manner to try to get more money from people in arcades, or they were just designed as kind of an afterthought. Designers were like, you know, we need to have one of these, but you know, we don't really care. Let's just put it in here. But clearly someone really cared about doing a good job with this and making it very in-depth and giving people a reason to sort of min-max this game, and I can really respect that. And a lot of the older Capcom titles were very much about that. It seems to have definitely been a core tenet of Capcom's early arcade design philosophy. And I can get behind that. There's a reason that some of the most memorable arcade games of all time have the Capcom stamp on them. But yeah, that's basically it. That is SonSon, published and developed by Capcom for arcades in 1984. We are playing the Capcom Arcade Cabinet release, which is a proper port of the original arcade version. There was a sequel to this that did come out on the PC Engine in Japan called SonSon 2. I don't know anything about it. And this game actually did come out on the Famicom in Japan, though I don't believe either game got a North American release. So this is probably your best way to oh yeah, sweet achievement. This is probably your best way to play SonSon if you want to do it. And it's a perfect port. And it is a lot of fun. I am really having a good time with this. If you like score attack stuff, if you do like shmups, there is a lot to like here. My name has been Parallax Abstraction. Thank you all very much for watching, and I'll see you next time.